This is Rebuilders, the leaders we need for the decade ahead. We all know change is a constant. It's just how fast, intensely, and inequitably the change around us is accelerating. As we move into the decade ahead, economic, social, and health inequalities will have created an increasingly uneven and siloed America. These changes didn't start with the events of 2020. They've been accelerating for over a generation. And now, technology, media, and COVID are amplifiers dividing us in ways we've never seen before. Our leaders need to adapt. The future of our communities and our world depend on it. But the ways we thought about leadership in the past will not get us to where we want to go in the future. America is at an inflection point, and if the right leaders show up, we will emerge from the decade ahead stronger and a better nation for everyone. This is Rebuilders, the leaders we need for the decade ahead. Here's your host, Paul Shoemaker.
A couple of weeks ago, I was paging through Fast Company magazine, and I came across an article that said 6 trends that will reshape business purpose in 2021. The article starts off, the world we're entering in 2021 will be far different than we imagined a year ago. And yet we begin the year armed with lessons from 2020, as well as new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings, and renewed hope. That is certainly someone speaking to me. And then in terms of the trends that she's suggesting, the number one trend is about authentic purpose measured in action, transparency, and accountability. And the author of that piece was Carol Cohn, who's joining me today. It's great to have you here today, Carol.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to people that are passionate about purpose.
Amen. Ditto. So same question I ask everybody at the start. When you look at the decade ahead, what is the one or two personal leadership attributes that you think are going to be needed most in our world?
Well, there are 2. So hopefully I get 2.
Yeah.
The first one is empathy. And you have got to recognize in this world, command and control is gone. It is over. We are in a distributed culture. We have people never going back to the office. And you just have to be able to understand like what is going on in their lives, in their work, that they're all interrelated. And so empathy is number 1. The second one is collaboration, because unless you're a Gemini like me, and I try and have conversations with myself so I can be more creative, but no,
just sit in on one of those.
Yeah, kidding aside, collaboration is where the best ideas come from, because you have so many different. If you're open to diverse opinions and different ages and stages and backgrounds and such, that's where great ideas come from.
Empathy and collaboration. Those both grow directly out of a generosity mindset. Back in the 1980s, before social purpose and cause marketing became mainstream, Carol Cohn was one of the first people to start talking about social purpose in business. She put together initiatives like the Avon Breast Cancer Crusade and so many more. And recently, the Special Aflac Duck, a robot developed from extensive child-centered design to comfort children going through chemotherapy. Her consulting firm's Cohn Incorporated. They do a range of cause brand consulting. She's a pretty phenomenal person and has an incredible history. If you're in the private sector trying to figure out how to navigate all this, she is a great person to listen to for the next few minutes. We're going to dive back in with her on authenticity first and how that does or doesn't show up in people that want to do purpose or green or pink washing. And she'll also explain to us how much of an emotional and a human dynamic there is to authenticity. So when I read your piece, as I said off the top, when you said there are 6 trends that will be prevalent in 2021, number one is about authentic purpose. And in my book, I believe one of the most important attributes of leaders going forward is what I call 24/7 authenticity, because it's so omnipresent. It's going to have to be so significant. People are going to have to live this as leaders all the time. Tell me what you meant by trend number one is authentic purpose measured in action, transparency, and accountability. Why is that number one, and what does authentic mean?
Well, authentic means real. And we are at a crossroads today where you have purpose washing, or it can be greenwashing, pink washing. There's so much, purpose is it's like the eye candy. It's the red shiny object. And you have ad agencies, PR agencies, consultancies, and sole practitioners. Everybody wants to be doing purpose. And of course, you have to define what purpose is. And, purpose, we say it's an organization's or brand reason for being. It's an aspirational reason for being beyond profits that's embedded in humanity. So it's human and it's emotional. And so, we're finding that authentic purpose, it is not about a cute ad, and it's not about just a donation. And so we're at this crossroads and that's why I wrote this authenticity essay, that it's long. In a world of snackable content, I hope, those who really want it will read it. It's 4,000 words. You can get it at our website, Carol Cohn on Purpose, or I'm sure you can find it on LinkedIn or other places. But it's about being real, and it's about having a long-term commitment to bringing society into the business, or the environment into the business, and then it's embedding it in the business operations. And that's where we are at this moment in time. There's a lot of good meaning C-suite leaders who say, yeah, there's this thing called purpose. We need to do it. They don't understand yet that it's not about giving some more money to the foundation. It's about doing things that are far more profound.
That's great. And Carol comes from a very deep place around purpose, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I'm curious, when you think about authentic leaders, because you talked about pink washing, greenwashing, are there ways that you feel like we can sort of recognize authenticity in leaders? And are there a few leaders that to you exemplify that quality?
Well, first of all, it's walking the talk. It's not just saying this is our goal, we're going to have gender equity by 2025. It's actually analyzing what is the equity in management in the company. And then, okay, this is where we are. So authentic means saying where we are, what are our goals, reporting every year on the goals, and being honest about missing the goals. Now, who are my heroes in this field?
Yeah.
I mean, I am such a fangirl for Paul Pullman. It is unbelievable. I mean, obviously he led Unilever through for 10 years.
He's amazing.
Created the Sustainable Living Plan. And the cool thing about it is he knows me, which is like a crazy thing. When I was at Edelman for 5 years, leading their business with social purpose practice, for the time I was there, I had 100 people around the globe, and it was the best in the world. They represented Unilever. And so, but they were doing more about communications, not strategy. And when I got there, and then I built this team up, we started doing strategy. And I met Paul at a number of events. And it was funny because, oh God, I don't know, about 4 months ago, I always get lots of emails from young people and they need help or whatever. And this woman says, Paul Pullman said for me to contact you. And so I'm helping her. She's got this new idea for a company. And I said, how did you get to me? Oh, Paul said you got to talk to Carol Cohn. So I am touched by the fact that he really knows me. But I got to work on I got to work on Dove, and we created the Vaseline Healing Project. And so the fact, and by the way, in creating the Sustainable Living Plan, making sustainable living commonplace, it was not a straight line. I know a lot of people that were leaders there, and they said you started, you stopped, you zigged, you zagged. You had to, really embed it, not just in the 200 leadership, but now they're taking all employees, thousands and thousands, to find their own personal purpose. And their new CEO, Alan Jope, the great thing is that he is continuing to move them forward. It's now called the Compass. It's a little bit different, but they are not giving it up. And he has gone as far to say that if a brand doesn't have a purpose, they're going to likely sell it. So considering they only have about 30 purpose at the center brands, and they got 400 overall, they got a lot of work to do. So that's one. The second one is Satya Nadella at Microsoft.
Yep.
He's a servant leader. And I think some of it comes from the fact that he's two children who are differently abled. And he recognizes that there's a great line in a friend of mine's book, Akhtar Bedshaw, who talks about the purpose mindset. And he's talking about one of the senior leaders at Microsoft. And he said, we had to go from a nation of know-it-alls to a nation of learn-it-alls. Not a nation, but a company. And, Satya has really moved them in a very rich and powerful and stop being arrogant, because they were, company. And I just adore the direction that Microsoft is going in.
Love those two examples. Akhtar is a good friend.
Oh, he's a sweetheart. I got to work with him. We actually created something called Microsoft Youth Spark, which they said we connected.
I remember that.
They're B2B, they're B2C, they're government business. And they said it couldn't be done, and we did.
Yep. I want to shift the topic in just a second, but I want to ask one more question about the authenticity. I think that being an authentic leader is not only more important today, I also think it's harder. The bar has gotten raised by digital media, social media, the splintering of sort of society. Do you agree that the bar is higher on what it takes and means to be an authentic leader?
I think it's more of it's yes, it's higher, but it's always on. And I think that when you have a direction and a purpose and it guides you, it focuses you, strategies about focus, that I think the hardest part is about political activism these days. And I think that certain leaders, they're bifurcated, like what's best for the company, but what are my employees asking for? And, you've seen walkouts at Google and a lot of the other technology companies, and it's not easy to make a decision. Thank God that with the insurrection in the Capitol, that wasn't a difficult decision to make. And I was amazed that the companies just jumped right in and they said, we're going to pull our PAC money and we're going to just really, we're just going to, this was wrong. And so that's a good thing. I think there's other issues that they're still bifurcated on, but there's a lot on a CEO's plate today and you can't hide it. You've got to deal with it. Hopefully you've got a terrific communications person, because the chief communications officer is not about communications. It's about how the company behaves. It's more like a chief culture officer. And the best leaders are listening to their teams and having a lot of cross-functional conversation.
Awesome. Okay, so good deep dive on authenticity. Want to shift gears just a little bit. If you read the start of Carol's bio, it says Carol Cohn pioneered the field of social purpose in the 80s. And today is widely recognized as one of the world's foremost social impact experts. Her work has built global movements, garnered hundreds of awards, and raised billions of dollars for a variety of causes. Not too bad for a day's work. In terms of social purpose and the whole movement, how did the events of 2020 impact the social purpose movement?
Well, 2020 is the great reset. And companies during the pandemic, those that were humanistic, those that knew their purpose, they immediately, like the very next day, they recognized we have to protect our employees first. Then they looked at plants and plant communities. And then they looked at what do the first responders need? And they pivoted wicked fast. And so that was one thing. And then you all had to learn, if you weren't digital, you had to be digital. If you were only partially digital, you had to go faster. They went really, really fast. That's, coming up with solutions and not having all of the information. We've got to go ahead with it. There was and then the companies did something they practiced smart generosity. And that means they looked at their core competencies and they said, how can we help in the pandemic? And whether it's changing manufacturing to create ventilators or PPE or such. I mean, companies truly pivoted. One of my B2B favorites, Lineage Logistics, they are a refrigerated storage company. They handle 1/3 of the US food, about 1/10 of the global food. They're giant refrigeration facilities, and they do all sorts of transport. And they recognize, and their purpose is feed the world. And they recognized that hunger was going to be huge. And so they reached out. This is collaboration. So I'm jumping ahead on you. And they reached out to hundreds of their customers. And they said, join us in this massive effort. It's going to be called Feed the World. We have a goal to create 100 million meals. Join us. And they did it. Wow. And so there were new collaborations. And then CEOs also learned that they had to be front and center. Their employees were scared. Everybody was scared. Is the world going to be absolutely just blow up? And they over communicated. So they're very visible, and they walked the talk.
Hope you're following along and enjoying this as much with me now as I did back when I talked with Carol a few months ago. So we're going to keep talking about how much everything that happened in 2020 and is continuing into 2021, how much will it stick? And what did and what do private sector leaders do that are real? And then we're going to pivot into a little bit of talking about cross-sector fluency, because that's so critical to the way she thinks about the world. And also she'll talk about something called the Purpose Collaborative. And then we'll finish off an advice to her younger self and how she feels about the decade ahead, like we do with a lot of our guests. Do you have any worries that some of that sense of corporate commitment to social purpose, that it'll be transitory and focus or revert? Or do you think, as you said, was it truly a great reset, and you think this is really going to stick, and a lot of companies, a lot of CEOs really have sort of like found a stronger direction?
I think that systemic racism is not going to go back. I think that is part of the huge reset, because we saw when George Floyd was murdered, and I say he was murdered.
Yep.
And then the response that not only did companies say, okay, we're going to look at what we're doing, but they're really walking the talk. And so, and I see it daily. I see a lot of companies not sure what to do, but they're making commitments. There's a great commitment I saw. Small businesses are hurting, Black small businesses, people of color small businesses. Goldman Sachs, they're 10,000 small businesses. They pivoted. They're working with the Hope Initiative in the Deep South, and they're going to fund, I think, $130 million, going to fund small businesses. And you're seeing a lot of banks, they're going to the systemic part of systemic racism. And they're dealing with mortgages and fairness there. They're dealing with health. Centene, which is the largest managed care company for underserved in this country, they're over $100 billion. They are partnering. I thought this was great. Again, this is collaboration. They're always been social responsible because they are about the community and about healthcare, one person at a time. And I don't represent them, but I do love what they do. And they are partnering with Samsung to bring telehealth. A whole nother, we can go to the doctor on our computers. Who knew, right? So they're going to bring telehealth to underserved communities as well as rural communities. So there's all these new skills or collaborations or connections that we learned because we had to. And now I believe that a lot of them are going to stick. A lot.
Good. I think so too. I don't know if there's a question or just a statement. Another characteristic that I talk about in my book that I think is so important, I call it cross-sector fluency. And the question I was going to ask you was, how do you sort of identify those leaders that are truly committed and really going to stick with it? And I think part of it is that fluency with which they move back and forth across those three sectors. So that's a little bit of a setup question, but do you agree with that? Do you see that in leaders that are really going to make the stuff stick?
Well, leaders who understand collaboration.
Yeah. And
they understand it's not about them. It's about the creativity, the mind power. Skilled volunteerism is really a very powerful thing, and it doesn't involve cash. but it provides someone an opportunity to get out of their shoes and get into somebody else's shoes. I have to give you a great little story. It's really great about cross-sector. We worked with PNC Bank when they were like the 12th largest bank, then they're like the 5th largest bank. And this is in 2004. And they were donating $10 million to all sorts of things. And their CEO said, no, we got to focus it. And so we focused it. He said, go find, what we need to do. And so long story short, we identified the issue of early childhood education because a child, especially underserved, 3 and 4-year-olds need to go to preschool and learn so they're prepared for kindergarten. And there's a lot of data now that says that, $1 invested in preschool returns like $17. So we partnered them cross collaboration with National Head Start Association, had never been done with a company, with Sesame Workshop. Ooh, that's surprising. And with Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, makes sense. They're in Pittsburgh. And then ultimately Donors Choose. And also then created an advisory board of all sorts of leaders, et cetera, et cetera. PNC was not the expert in early childhood, but they were wise enough that they were great at cross-sector collaborations, especially when they went into new cities. So they are just a great, great example of a company doing cross-sector. But one of the things they did once upon a time in skilled volunteerism, it blew me away. We were having our reporting meeting, and they had a person from Head Start, and they had their head of HR, and it was a panel, and they were talking about how Head Start had never had job descriptions for its preschool teachers. And so PNC created it for them, and it gave them guidelines for the kind of people that they could hire and put into preschool. And it was like, oh my God, doesn't that make sense? Of course it makes sense. But, that's just a small example of, how you can work in a cross-sector collaboration, and it's a win-win-win.
I love it. And I think that happens because some of those leaders become so fluent at that. When I talk to folks like Carol that have big brains and big ideas, I also like to bring it back down to home. You're a leader yourself. You run an organization yourself. How would you describe sort of your leadership approach and set of beliefs when you run your firm, Carol Cohn on Purpose?
Well, first of all, we're so different because when I was a Cohn of Cohn, so Cohn Communications, we were the first social purpose consultancy. We focused on social purpose, but we also did marketing communications, and we also did .coms. So I'm going to date myself. And at that point, I had a full organization, and we all, we lived under one roof, and then we had a few offices and such. My leadership style was more than you got to hire people much better and different from you and let them go. I didn't micromanage. I had a whole bunch of mishits in terms of my senior leadership team. Boy, I had some great ones, and I had some horrible ones. My joke is I started at 6 feet tall. Now I'm 5 feet tall. So, a lot of learning there. Now that we are we are all in different places. We all work from home. And so in one way, you get the best team. In another way, you have to be incredibly respectful of everybody's working styles, because I have some people, and I love to talk things through, and I want to talk. And I have a partner who is a genius. I mean, ultimate genius. She does not want to talk things through with me. She wants to email things through with me. So I have to respect that. But every time we're on a phone with a client or such, she just blows me away. So I have to take a deep breath and go, trust her totally. And I have to respect her communication style. So, and some people like to work in the middle of the night. Some people want to, get up and go running in the morning. So it's a very, very different world. And you have to trust your people, but you have to set the direction. What is our true north? And our goal as an organization, Carol Cohn on Purpose, and I named it that double entendre. When I left Edelman, I sold my name Cohn to Omnicom, so it couldn't be Cohn again. So I knew Purpose was about to explode in terms of the name. So the double entendre, Carol Cohn on Purpose, and that we have people all over the world. But we also have a new model. And our model is at the core, it's senior people, very, very flat, senior leaders on business. But we also, to expand and contract, I also created the Purpose Collaborative. And the Purpose Collaborative, when I left Edelman, I was used to having a lot of capability and I needed it quickly because I wasn't getting any younger. So I called up some of my friends because I know a lot of people in doing this work. And I said, I want you to join our collaborative. And they went, yeah. So we have over 40 companies. And we have 3 video production companies of different types and styles. We have data analytics. We have purpose in sport, purpose in food. We have all of Latin America is sewn up. We have research. It's wonderful. So we create bespoke teams for a client. And I believe that's a new way to work. They don't have to pay for 60 offices around the globe that aren't giving them any value.
Were there any role models that you look to figure out your leadership style, particularly early on, or was an awful lot of it just sort of like learning as you go and figuring out real time?
Well, I think that it was more who were purpose leaders. And one of my favorites, and she unfortunately died really young, was Anita Roddick. And The Body Shop. I mean, I'm old enough, unfortunately, or fortunately, I grew up with Ben and Jerry. So I knew Ben Cohen. And there was this group called the Social Venture Network. And I was part of it. And it was Gary Hirschberg from Stonyfield and Tom Chappell from Tom's of Maine and Anita Roddick. And we were and everybody thought we were like such weirdos because we believed in socially responsible business. What the heck was that? So I learned from them. Because they were such radically different leaders. And, I also learned about, on the job too, and some of it was good and some of it wasn't good. I also learned from some of my clients. Eva Bloom she was the president of the PNC Foundation, and her CEO, Jim Rohr. I mean, they were just great and they believed in what we did and they were such great partners. And so I saw a lot of our clients that truly inspired me, albeit I didn't have companies with hundreds of thousands of people.
2 more questions. We've heard such a range and breadth of your experience. I think it's fun sometimes to ask somebody, either if you had a chance to go back and talk to your 20-something self, or if you were talking to a room full of 20-somethings today, what advice would you give them about leadership that you wish you'd have known back then?
Know your own personal purpose.
Mm-hmm.
People who understand. Now, I didn't sit and talk to myself, what's your personal purpose? I had this gut. And it's because I grew up in the 60s and the 70s and the Kennedys were shot when I was just old enough and Martin Luther King was shot and you had the civil rights, movement and Vietnam. So, and I had a liberal family. And so nobody said you're going to be the purpose queen, albeit I've been given that title from the BBC. I came from a very creative family. I love to write, albeit I'm not the world's greatest writer. It's really a chore, but I loved words. I love words. And so when I went to college, and this is little known, I was number 1 in my class because I studied my butt off, but I had an English teacher that was really tough. And I just killed myself on those papers. And in those days we used typewriters, guys. Oh my God. And yes, I know. So, know your personal purpose. My purpose is to teach others that purpose is a business strategy and a brand strategy, and that it can really make for a much, much different organization. And so I'm just trying to help, whether it's businesses or organizations or career changers or students, find work like that. Now, I'm not helping them to look for their personal purpose. They got to do that on their own. But I found mine, so I'm pretty lucky.
Right. One of the things that motivated me to write a book was looking at the decade ahead, which I think is extremely daunting. It's as many challenges as we have faced as a country in a long time. From your perspective, when you look at the 10 years ahead, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic? And why?
Well, you got to be optimistic to do this kind of work because you get run over a lot. I've had a lot of great ideas. Oh, I should tell you a great idea. I had this one idea. I have to tell this story. And it was for Smirnoff vodka. And they called us in and they said, this is the early years. And they said, we have this new ad coming out and it's a glass of vodka with ice cubes in it. And it's got kind of a blue background. There's nothing in the ad. They said, bring this to life. And I went, what? So I brought my team together and we said, oh, we're going to have ice carnivals. We're going to do this or that. And then somebody said, because this is the early days of Purpose, they said, who's the target? The target are young drinkers, just learning about brands like 21, 22, 23. And we said, what is on their mind in terms of a social issue? And it was the Cold War. And so somebody, and it wasn't me, brilliant on my team said, the Berlin Wall, it's scary. There's communism. What are we going to do? We got to tear down that wall. So we came up with this great idea called Tear Down the Wall. And it was this blue icy picture. And every time you bought a bottle of Smirnoff, it would help. Money would go to this Tear Down the Wall foundation. And we would send young people from the US to Russia and Russia to here, and they would learn about each other. And it just went on and on. It was gorgeous. So we present it. We go to Smirnoff. We have one idea, not two, one. And we present this idea. And they're like speechless. And then they go, well, thank you very much, so then we leave. So about 5 days later, they call me up and they want you want the good news or the bad news? And I went, how about the bad news or the good news? I don't know what I said. They said, well, we love Tear Down the Wall. Yay. And you got our business. Yay. But we're not going to do the campaign. And then the Berlin Wall came down 6 months later.
Yeah, that was timely.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just one of my, that's my point, saying that this is not a straight line route in terms of this world. But being optimistic is we have to, after COVID and after what it really showed, the underbelly of underserved and the gross inequities in our culture as well as around the globe, and climate. Climate absolutely is probably it is said to be the existential challenge of our generation. And if you saw what happened in Texas, and I live in Florida, and it's like horrible, and the hurricanes and this and that and the fires, and we have got to deal with it. And the good news is that there's a lot of innovation. This crisis really sparks innovation. If you have leaders who allow for trialing and winning and not winning. A lot of purpose-driven companies have internal incubators. And I think that's a really good sign.
Good. I like that answer. You may or may not be, but we really don't have any choice. We have to choose to be optimistic in the decade ahead. I love that answer. Thank you so much for spending time with me. My guess is we could talk for another half hour, and we may talk another half hour again someday later on. But thank you so much for your time, Carol.
I'm happy to come back.
Awesome.
And they're great questions. So good luck with the book. And, keep on moving things ahead.
Thank you so much.
And I want to end with, sorry, losing my voice. When I end with the question I always put at the end of my speeches, what is your purpose?
Thank you for listening to the Rebuilders Podcast. For more information, resources, and episodes, visit paulshoemaker.org. That's paulshoemaker.org.